master architect makes the ultimate sacrifice to protect his world. This is the story of the great cities of the Elves, architecture of light and eternity. A tale not of simple construction, but of a harmony that nearly shattered forever. By the end, you will understand how true strength is found not in unchanging perfection, but in balance. I wonder where you are listening from right now, and what the light looks like through your window. In the radiant heart of Luminara, the city of dawn, Master Architect Elion faced an impossible choice. His hands, steady for centuries, trembled as he prepared to act not as a builder, but as a protector. Before him pulsed the central crystal of the Solar Spire, a marvel. The architect's choice was not a gentle one. Elion's hands did not falter as he redirected the spire's energy, causing a controlled change in the great crystal. A sound like 1,000 bells shifting echoed through the chamber, not a roar of destruction, but a profound, resonant chime that was felt in the very bones of the city itself. Light flowed from the change, not in a beam, but in a shimmering, unstable aurora that painted the white towers in volatile hues of violet and gold. In that chaotic radiance, Elion moved. He did not look back at his life's work, now releasing its essence into the air. He reached into the cascading energy, his fingers protected by ancient glyphs woven into his gloves, and seized a single, palm-sized shard. It pulsed in his hand like a captured star, hot and cold all at once, whispering with raw, untamed power. This was the moment the dream of Luminara changed. The harmonic alarms, usually soft chimes for the changing of the light, now blared a discordant, piercing song that swept through every crystalline corridor and floating garden plaza. From the central citadel, Captain Valeria of the Guardians of the Dawn emerged, her armor reflecting the chaotic sky. Her face, usually a mask of serene vigilance, was etched with a cold, furious clarity. The information flowing through her helmet showed one undeniable truth. The Spire's destabilization was no accident. It was a deliberate act, and the only person with the knowledge and access was the architect now fleeing the scene. His name was broadcast across the city's awareness, not with honor, but with a single, defining label. The city he loved became a labyrinth of peril. The very beauty he had helped design now turned against him. Avenues that once glowed with a steady, welcoming light now flickered wildly with the spire's distress, casting long, shifting shadows. Citizens looked up in confusion and growing fear as minor spatial ripples, like heat haze on a summer day, distorted the air. A floating walkway would shudder momentarily. A melody from a public crystal would warp and skip. These were not simple malfunctions, but subtle tremors in reality itself, far more unsettling than any physical damage. And through this disorienting landscape, Elion ran. He did not head for the majestic gates of the city, now doubtless sealing shut. Instead, he moved against the flow of the responding guardians, diving into service conduits and ascending through vertical light shafts, pathways known only to the architects of light. He was a ghost in the machine of his own creation. His destination made no tactical sense to a pursuer. He was heading deeper into the city's heart, toward the oldest quarter, where the structures were not crystalline, but carved from the living bedrock of the mountain. His goal was the sealed entrance to the archives of the first song, a repository so old its original purpose had faded into ritual. the guardians would expect a fugitive to flee outward. They did not expect one to seek a vault of forgotten memory, but Elion knew the true crisis was not his capture. It was the unstable shard in his hand, and the profound change in the spire. The answers, if they existed, lay not in forward momentum, but in deep understanding. The stakes escalated with a terrible, logical grace. As Captain Valeria's frustration grew, she authorized a protocol unused for millennia. Across the city, sentinel statues carved into the architecture, the lightwarden golems, stirred. Their eyes, dull gemstones for centuries, ignited with a pale, relentless blue light. They detached from their niches in walls and pillars, their forms of polished stone and infused crystal, moving with a silent, unstoppable purpose. They were not hunters that tracked scent or sound. They were programmed to sense anomalies in the city's harmonic energy field, and Elion, carrying the wildly dissonant shard of the central crystal, was the brightest anomaly of all. Now, the very walls seemed to watch him. A balcony railing might twist to block his path. A previously open archway might solidify with a sudden weave of light. The city itself had become an active, intelligent presence. He found the archive's entrance hidden behind a waterfall of luminescent moss, its stone door inscribed with melodies instead of words. Placing his hand on the cool rock, he hummed a few notes of the foundational chord, the first song itself. The door did not swing open grandly. It shimmered and became insubstantial, a curtain of mist. As Elion passed through the threshold, the solid stone resealed behind him, muting the city's alarm song into a distant, echoing hum. He stood in absolute darkness, broken only by the feverish pulse of the crystal shard in his hand. His breath steadied. The frantic race was over, for now, but as the silence of forgotten ages pressed in on him, Elion understood the harder journey was just beginning. He had unleashed the warning. Now he had to find the understanding, waiting somewhere in the echoes of how his world began. The air in the archives was thick with the scent of old stone and undisturbed time. Elion held the pulsing shard aloft, and its chaotic light did not merely illuminate, it awakened. Where its radiance touched the walls, lines of silver script, dormant for ages, flared to life like sleeping embers stirred by a breath. These were not simple records. They were star charts, mapping celestial harmonies and builders' hymns etched not in ink, but in solidified melody. The shard was a key, its dissonant energy somehow resonating with these ancient patterns, forcing them to reveal their truths. He read of the world's song, the foundational harmony from which all elven craft sprang. It was not a single, dominant note, but a complex chord of interwoven energies, the deep bass of stone, the fluid melody of water, the whispering harmony of growing things, and the brilliant treble of starlight. Each great city was meant to be a variation on this theme, a unique expression of the chord. Luminara, in its glorious pursuit of eternal dawn, had amplified the stellar note until it overwhelmed all others. Its light was a scream in a symphony, and the silent cracks spreading were the world's structure straining under the pressure of a broken song. The imbalance was continental, a slow tear in the fabric of everything. The scrape of armored boots on crystal echoed from the corridor beyond the mist door. Valeria's scouts had traced the energy signature. Elion's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a counterpoint to the scholarly calm he forced into his hands. Panic was a luxury he could not afford. He saw the core of the truth, a set of principles describing harmonic restoration. This knowledge could not be lost with him. He found a shelf of light-infused parchment, blank and waiting, and began to transcribe. Each symbol he copied with a focused beam from the shard was an eternity, the sounds outside growing clearer, more organized. He was betting his capture against the survival of the cure. As he worked, the spire's distress made the archive itself a victim. A tremor passed through the mountain, and a towering bookshelf of obsidian tablets to his left shimmered, becoming translucent, then solid, then half-phased into some other space. A ghost of itself, it was a visceral, terrifying proof. The silent cracks were no longer silent or invisible. They were here, erasing reality in flickers. He finished the last rune, rolling the scrolls with trembling fingers and securing them in an insulated satchel made of shadow weave. The tremor that followed was stronger. It was not a shake, but a deep, groaning shift. The wall behind the phased bookshelf rippled like water, the stone flowing aside to reveal not a door, but a descending spiral stair, hewn into the living rock. It exhaled a breath of air far older than the archive, carrying the damp, mineral scent of the deep earth and something else, a faint, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in his teeth. The path did not lead out. It led down into the absolute foundations. With one last glance at the glowing mist door, now vibrating with the impact of something heavy on the other side, Elion turned his back on escape and stepped into the dark descent. The answers, it seemed, were waiting even deeper than memory. The stairwell descended into a world of raw humming power. Elion followed the deep resonance, the air growing thick with the scent of ozone and wet stone, until he emerged into a cavern of impossible scale. This was not a dark hollow, but the roots of Luminara. Above him, the city's foundations plunged into the earth like crystalline taproots, glowing with a soft, strained light. They were embedded in veins of raw energy, ley lines that pulsed with colors of molten earth, flowing water, and whispering air. Here the world song was not an abstract concept, it was a physical trembling presence he could feel in his bones. And it was in distress. A young elf with hands stained by mineral dust stood before a shuddering crystal cluster, her palms pressed against its facets, as she hummed a low stabilizing melody. This was Lyra, a stone singer, geomancer. She turned at Elion's approach, her eyes wide not with recognition of his face, but with horror at the shard in his hand. Its chaotic pulse was a screeching dissonance against her healing song. The crystal cluster she tended flared with a sharp crack, a new fracture spreading across its surface. "You are a traitor," she began, her voice tight with fear and duty. But the evidence before her overruled the city's alarms. She saw how the shard's energy made the very ley lines recoil their harmonious flow, twisting into jagged, panicked arcs. The truth was in the stone, and the stone did not lie. Her suspicion melted into a grave, shared understanding. "You did this to show us," she whispered, not as an accusation, but a realization. Against every protocol, she lowered her defensive stance. The greater law was the balance of the roots. Their new alliance was immediately tested. The spire's imbalance echoed down through the foundations. A massive dormant geode nearby resonated with the wrong frequency and violently erupted. It was not an explosion of rock, but a shard storm. Thousands of crystal fragments, each humming with wild energy, filled the air like lethal glitter, slicing through stalactites and embedding themselves deep into the glowing roots. Elion and Lyra dove behind a monolithic ley line, conduit the deadly rain, pinging and shattering against it. This was the silent cracks, made visible and violent, a microcosm of what was happening across the continent. If this cavern network failed, the entire foundation of Luminara would follow a catastrophic unraveling, starting from the ground up. As the shard storm subsided to a dangerous drizzle, Elion showed Lyra the scrolls. He explained the harmonic principles, the necessity of restoring the full world song chord, not just the lone note of starlight. Lyra's expertise gave the theory immediate practical shape. She pointed to a major ley nexus, where 3 energy streams converged, now nodding and flaring with stress. "We cannot fix the spire from here," she said, her voice steady with focus. "But we can give the roots a moment to breathe. We can apply a counter-harmony, a temporary bandage of earth and water melodies to ease the strain." It was a delicate, dangerous act of musical surgery. Lyra positioned herself at the convergence, her hands on the warm stone, and began the deep grounding song of stone. Elion, using the unstable shard, not as a tool, but as a focal point, carefully modulated its output, weaving threads of its stellar energy into her melody. He did not try to silence the shard, he tried to harmonize with her. For several long minutes, the cavern trembled on a knife's edge, the conflicting energies warring. Then slowly, the knotted light of the nexus began to unwind. The violent pulsing softened to a rhythmic, if weary, glow. A fragile, temporary calm settled over the roots. The immediate crisis was averted. In the sudden quiet, Lyra slumped, exhausted but alert. She looked at Elion, her mind racing ahead. "A bandage will not heal this. The principles you found, they are a diagnosis. We need a cure known to those who never forgot the full song." Her proposal was a desperate gamble. "We must seek Sylvan Weave." The words held a tone of awe. Sylvan Weave was the mobile city of the forest elves, a living architecture of great trees and woven song, a place that embodied the harmony of growth and water. Their elders remember the old ways, the complete chord. They might know how to recalibrate a spire without destroying it, but reaching them meant leaving a city that saw Elion as its greatest enemy and venturing into a world already trembling with the consequences of Luminara's beautiful, blinding light. The path forward was not upward toward escape, but outward into the living heart of a world, trying desperately to hold its song together. The hidden paths Lyra knew were not doors, but seams in the world, places where the stone remembered being water and could, for a moment, become fluid again. With a focused hum and the press of her palm, she opened a way through the cavern wall, a tunnel that smelled of damp earth and deep time. Their journey into the Everwood was a passage from a realm of hard light into one of soft shadow. The air grew thick with the scent of loam and blooming night flowers, and the constant harmonic hum of Luminara faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant call of unknown creatures. Here, the world felt ancient and watchful. Their progress was halted by the gaping chasm, a deep scar in the forest floor where the land had simply fallen away, perhaps an early sign of the spreading silent cracks. The far side was a dark line in the misty air, impossibly distant. Lyra stared in despair, calculating the days a detour would cost. But Elion's eyes, trained to see structure and emptiness, saw a solution. The ravine was not empty. It was filled with drifting spores from the giant glow mosses above, microscopic particles that hung in the humid air. He had no tools, no crystals, no forge. Only his knowledge and the volatile shard, which he now understood not as a weapon, but as a conductor. He asked Lyra for strength, not of muscle, but of song. As she began a low, steadying chant to the air itself, asking the spores to gather and hold, Elion raised the shard. He did not unleash its power. Instead, he carefully pulsed it, sending out precise, rapid filaments of light. Each thread touched a spore, and for a breathtaking instant, the particle would shine. He was not building a bridge of matter, but weaving one of momentary light, a shimmering, ephemeral walkway of 10,000 fading sparks. It was architecture stripped to its purest essence, a path that existed only so long as he and Lyra willed it into being. Step by careful step, they crossed the void on a road of singing light that vanished behind them like a dream upon waking. On the far side, Lyra looked at him, her earlier judgment replaced by stunned respect. He had not broken anything to escape. He had built. This fragile partnership of leaf and light was interrupted by a new chill in the air. It was not the cool of the forest, but an absence of warmth, a silence that consumed sound. The shade stalker emerged from the deepening gloom, not by moving, but by the shadows around it deepening and coalescing. It was a figure of solidified void, a walking silhouette with eyes like pinpricks of cold, starless space. Luminara's council had not just condemned Elion, they had given form to the darkness his actions had fearfully created. Conventional light did not affect it. Light was its native element, merely absorbed. This was no longer a pursuit. It was an execution order given form. Confrontation was impossible. Their gifts were creation and song, and this thing was an artifact of pure negation. Elion's instinct to outthink met Lyra's instinct to become part of the forest. "We do not fight the shadow," she whispered. "We become the wood." They ran, not with the frantic panic of the city, but with a fluid, deliberate grace. Lyra's hands brushed passing trunks, her song a plea. In their wake, great roots stirred sleepily from the forest floor, tangling into natural barricades. Thick curtains of hanging moss unfurled to block pathways. The forest itself, responding to its singer, began to gently hide them. The stalker moved through these obstacles with silent, relentless patience, parting roots like mist, but it was slowed. Each delay was a gift of distance. The escalation was terrifyingly clear. The council was willing to use forbidden arts that risked further harmonic tears simply to erase him. The danger was no longer imprisonment, but unmaking. This knowledge hung between them as they ran, a cold weight alongside the pulsing shard, yet it also forged their bond into something unbreakable. They were not just fugitives sharing a goal. They were now co-conspirators against oblivion, trusting each other with their very survival. When the first living towers of Sylvan weave finally appeared through the dense canopy, it was not a vision of serene refuge. The great migratory trees that formed the city's foundations were not dancing in their slow, graceful walk. They were braced, their enormous roots gripping the earth like clenched fists. Vines were woven into dense, defensive lattices, and the usual gentle bioluminescence of the fungal lanterns glowed with a sharp, alert intensity. The city was not at peace. It was holding its breath, standing guard against a gathering storm only its deepest senses could feel. Their desperate hope for sanctuary now carried a new, uneasy question. What had the Everwood already sensed that they, in their flight, had yet to see? The great trees of Sylvan weave did not welcome them with open boughs. Elion and Lyra were met at the living gate by sentinels whose armor was fashioned from hardened bark, and whose eyes held the deep, patient watchfulness of the forest itself. They were escorted not to a throne room, but to the Grove Heart, a vast natural amphitheater formed by the intertwined roots of the city's eldest trees. Here, the air hummed not with the crystal song of Luminara, but with a deeper, organic resonance, a melody of sap and soil. Yet even here, the strain was visible. High above, the edges of the great leaves were tinged with an unnatural, brittle brown, as if touched by an unseen frost. The silent cracks were not just a problem of light and stone, they were a blight upon life itself. The Council of the Grove Heart was a circle of profound disagreement. Elder Phelan, his form as gnarled and steady as an ancient oak, spoke with a voice like rustling leaves. He pointed a root-like finger, not at Elion, but westward, toward Luminara. Their hunger for eternal dawn bleeds the sky and starves the roots. Their aggression is a poison in the world's song. We must sever our connections, raise the thorn walls, and let their light consume itself. His words found strong agreement among many, their faces set in grim resolve. But others, like the younger singer Kalen, whose hair was woven with fresh vines, shook his head. The blight began before Luminara's spire reached its peak. I have listened to the deep earth. This discord feels older, a flaw not made, but awakened. To blame one city is to ignore the disease for a single symptom. Into this fractured chorus, Elion stepped forward. He did not plead for sanctuary. He presented the pulsating shard, holding it aloft so its chaotic light played over the concerned faces of the elders. "This is not a weapon I took," he said, his voice carrying the weariness of his journey. "It is a symptom, as you say, a piece of a cry that is tearing the symphony apart. I have brought the principles of the first song, knowledge from the deepest archives, but theory is not proof. We stand here arguing over the source of a fever while the patient weakens." It was then that a new tension arrived in the grove. A messenger hurried to Elder Phelan, whispering urgently. From the main approach, a contingent of Luminaran guardians emerged, their polished armor and steady light a stark contrast to the dappled forest gloom. At their head was not Captain Valeria, but her second in command, a lieutenant whose expression was diplomatically neutral, but whose eyes were hard. He bowed with precise courtesy. "The Council of Luminara formally requests the return of the fugitive Elion for acts of sabotage and betrayal against the City of Dawn. The harmony of our two peoples has ever been our strength. Do not let one man's actions fray that bond." The statement hung in the air, a silent challenge. Elion looked from the lieutenant's rigid face to Elder Phelan's stormy expression, and then to the worried Kalen. He saw not two solutions, but a single, dangerous path. He spoke again, his proposal cutting through the thickening silence. "Do not send me back. Do not hide me. Use me, my shard as a key to a dissonant frequency. Sylvan Weave's heart tree is the finest listener to the living song in all the realms. Together, they could form a lens. Let us perform a joint ritual, a deep listening. Let the Grove Heart and the representatives of Luminara hear the world song directly, to hear the tear for themselves. You will have your proof, and I will have my verdict, written not by council law, but by the reality of our fading world. The risk was immense. Focusing such unstable energy through the ancient, sensitive heart tree could amplify the damage, attracting a spatial fracture directly to Sylvan Weave's core. It could overwhelm the tree's awareness or unravel the ritualist's focus. Yet the alternative was clearer by the moment: continued division and mutual blame as the foundation of everything slowly dissolved. After a long, silent exchange of glances among the elders, it was Kalen who spoke, his voice quiet but firm. To refuse to listen when the song is crying out is its own kind of failure. We must know, with deeply reluctant permission granted, the Grove Heart transformed from a council chamber into a site of urgent preparation. Forest singers and Luminaran light weavers, who had never collaborated, now moved in a tense, careful ballet around the colossal heart tree. Elion worked with Kalen to calibrate the shard's output, while Lyra and the geomancers reinforced the surrounding earth with stabilizing hymns. The Luminaran lieutenant and his guards watched from a sanctioned distance, their hands resting on their weapon hilts, their expressions unreadable. The air in the clearing grew thick with the scent of ozone and sacred resins, charged with an unspoken tension that was far heavier than the mist. Two worlds, built on different verses of the same song, held their breath, waiting to hear if their melody could still be saved, or if they were only preparing to hear its final, broken note. The ritual began not with a shout, but with a hum. Elion placed the volatile shard at the base of the heart tree, where its roots flowed like rivers of ancient wood. Lyra laid her hands upon the bark, singing the deep, grounding song of stone. Elder Phalon, his initial skepticism set aside for the necessity of truth, added his voice, a weathered baritone that was the memory of the forest itself. Elion then became the bridge, the conductor. He placed his hands on the shard, and as the combined harmonies of leaf and light flowed into him, he focused them, attuning the crystal's scream to the foundational frequency of the world's song. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air above the shard shimmered. A single, perfect note rang out, clear as a bell cast from pure light. It was not loud, but it was profound, vibrating in the chest of every elf present. From that central point, a wave of visible resonance expanded outward, a slow, rolling circle of shimmering sound and light. It passed through the grove, through the woven buildings of Sylvan Weave, and out into the surrounding everwood. It did not harm what it touched. Instead, it revealed. As the wave moved, the hidden truth of their world was unveiled. Across the landscape, jagged, dark lines flickered into existence, marking the very air and earth. They were the silent cracks, no longer silent or invisible. They looked like tears in a painting, rents in reality where the colors of life and magic simply faded into a starless void. Some were thin as thread, high in the canopy. Others were massive, splitting the sides of distant mountains. The vision was shared simultaneously by the Luminaran lieutenant, the forest council, and every citizen within the wave's reach. It was an undeniable map of a world in need of mending. Channeling this revelation was an immense strain for Elion. The energy was not meant to pass through a single being. He felt as if his bones were the strings of an instrument played by a storm. Every nerve sang with a luminous intensity. His vision blurred, but he held on, his body trembling as he maintained the connection. He was the fragile lens, and he knew if he broke, the vision would shatter with him, leaving only doubt and division in its wake. Elder Phelan watched the dark lines etch themselves across his beloved forest, across the distant glimmer of Luminara's spires. His face, a landscape of old bark and deep lines, shifted from stern judgment to a sorrowful, grim understanding. The blame was a petty distraction. The enemy was not the city of dawn, but the emptiness between the notes. As the resonant wave began to fade, he turned to the Luminaran envoy, his voice no longer that of a suspicious elder, but of a leader who has seen a shared fate. You will take no one back today. This man is no fugitive. He is a witness, and his testimony is written across the sky. Sylvan Weave stands with the truth, not with a city's fear. The diplomatic stalemate shattered with the clarity of a crystal bell. The Luminaran lieutenant stared, his rigid composure broken by the scale of the vision. He had no orders for this. With a curt, confused nod to his guards, he turned and retreated, his mission rendered meaningless by the larger crisis. But the immense pulse of harmonic energy had sent out a beacon far darker than any diplomatic signal. From a pool of concentrated shadow at the edge of the clearing, the shade stalker coalesced. Drawn to the powerful discharge, it ignored the retreating guards and moved with silent intent toward the heart tree, toward the exhausted Elion. As the stalker advanced, a new sound rose in Sylvan Weave. It was not a song of panic, but a chorus of awakening. The city itself began to defend its heart. The great trees surrounding the grove shifted, their branches lowering like interlocking spears to form a living palisade. Thorns on nearby bushes grew visibly, hardening into protective points. Vines, guided by the will of unseen singers, lashed out from the canopy, not to strike, but to entangle and hinder. The very architecture of Sylvan Weave, built from living, responsive matter, stirred to meet the threat. The defense would not be fought with blade or beam, but with the concerted, awakened will of a forest that had just seen how deeply it was threatened and had chosen to fight for its song. The shade stalker moved with the silent certainty of a closing shadow, but the forest was no longer merely a place. It was a presence, and it had been awakened. As the creature advanced, the heart tree's deep resonance shifted from a song of listening to a command of protection. Great roots emerged from the soft earth, not with violence, but with a swift, deliberate grace, coiling around the stalker's legs like serpents of ancient wood. Vines thick as a warrior's arm descended from the canopy, weaving a net of living fiber that held its form. This was not an attack of brute force, but a symphony of restraint, each tree and tendril moving in perfect wordless harmony with the next. Lyra did not hesitate. She placed her hands upon the nearest root, her voice joining the tree's silent song. Around her, the stone singers of Sylvan Weave added their own earthy melodies, their combined will guiding the living architecture. The entangling roots thickened, knitting together into a dense spherical cage of interlocked branches, containing the stalker within a prison of still growing wood. The display was breathtaking. Here was proof, written in action, that the disparate arts of leaf and light, of earth and song, could unite not just in theory, but in desperate, beautiful practice. A palpable wave of inspiration washed through the watching elves. The old division between their cities seemed for that brilliant moment like a distant memory. Yet the situation remained unresolved. Within its wooden prison, the Stalker did not struggle. It simply was a core of chilling negation. Where its form pressed against the living bars, the vibrant wood darkened not with rot, but with a creeping crystalline frost that leached the color and life from the fibers, turning them brittle and gray. The cage was holding, but it was being slowly changed from the inside. They had contained a symptom, not cured the source. All eyes turned to Elion, who leaned heavily against the heart tree, his face pale and drawn from the ritual strain. To address this construct born from a corrupted fragment of Luminara's own defensive arts required knowledge he alone might possess. The risk was immense. Forcing its end could cause the contained energy to recoil violently, affecting the clearing in a lasting way. "We cannot fight shadow with more shadow," he said, his voice thin but clear. "We must unravel it with a light it cannot absorb, a light too pure and focused to be consumed." His plan was an architect's solution, a feat of precise energy channeling. He proposed using refracted sunlight, not the raw, overwhelming blaze of Luminara's spire, but sunlight filtered and purified through a series of specially grown crystal lenses. It would be a needle of dawn, not a hammer. The task, however, demanded impossible coordination. Sylvan Weave's singers would have to gently part the living cage at the exact moment, while Luminara's light weavers, those who had come as guards and now stayed as reluctant allies, would have to calibrate the beam with flawless harmony. It was a test of the fledgling trust they had just witnessed. The operation that followed was a tense, silent ballet. Under Elion's whispered guidance, lenses were brought forth and aligned. Lyra and the singers hummed a softening melody to the cage, wood encouraging a small opening to form. The light weavers, their pride set aside by the greater need, focused their will. A beam of concentrated morning light, cool and brilliant as a diamond, lanced through the gap and into the Stalker's core. There was no explosion. The creature of shadow simply unfolded like ink, dissolving in clear water, its form dissipating into harmless motes that faded in the sunbeam. The affected wood of the cage stopped its decay. The collective exhale was a sound of profound relief and dawning unity. They had done it together. This successful collaborative act became a powerful symbol, a living parable, more convincing than any council decree. Yet the quiet triumph carried a sobering confirmation. The Stalker's very existence, its sophisticated design of consuming negation, proved that a faction within Luminara's high councils was not merely fearful, but was actively experimenting with dangerously unstable harmonic techniques. The pursuit of perfect unchanging light had spawned its own profound challenge. With the immediate concern eased, the fragile alliance faced its next logical step. They had a diagnosis, and they had proven a resolution was possible through unity. But to understand the wider situation, they needed a map. The silent cracks spanned the continent unseen, except through grand rituals. "We must go to Etheris," Elder Phalon declared, his voice firm with new resolve. "The sky mages of the floating city chart currents of magic and reality, as others chart the wind. Only they can show us the true scale of what we face." The path forward now led upward into the ever-shifting skies, to seek those who watch the world from above, hoping they would see not just fragments, but the whole fragile tapestry. The journey to the floating city was a lesson in scale. The sky pillars were not a staircase, but a forest of inverted mountains, their bases rooted in the clouds, and their peaks lost in the shimmering haze far above. The air here was thin and carried a constant low thrum of immense energy. Etheris itself was a ghostly silhouette wreathed in swirling vapors, its famous crystal bridges and observatory spires occasionally glinting like distant stars as the defensive mist curtains parted and closed. The city was not hiding, it was fortifying, pulling its ethereal drawbridges up against a world it perceived as growing dangerously unstable. Their petition for audience was met not with words, but with a sudden localized weather system. The air around the base of the nearest pillar solidified into a visible swirling maze of prismatic fog and audible wind channels. A voice resonant and without a clear source echoed around them. Those who seek the sky perspective must first prove they understand its nature. Force will scatter you, impatience will lose you. Follow the path the pillars have already written. It was a test of worthiness, a labyrinth of illusion and physics. The group stood at the entrance to the shimmering maze. Elder Phalon frowned his earth-bound senses, disoriented by the lack of solid ground. The Sylvan singers tuned their ears to the wind's song, but the melodies were deceptive, layered with false harmonies, designed to lead them into dead ends of howling gales. Lyra reached for the stone of the pillar itself, but its magic was of a different order, humming with levitation rather than gravity. It was Elion, his architect eyes, seeing patterns where others saw chaos, who found the key. He did not look at the confusing fog, he looked at the pillar. Its surface was inscribed with faint flowing glyphs, not for decoration, but for stabilization, a permanent spell of aerodynamic grace. The pattern was a map. The solution to the wind maze was not to fight the currents or follow the loudest path, but to move in harmony with the pillar's own, designed interaction with the air. He pointed to a nearly invisible glyph that glowed softly as a particular gust channeled past it. That gust, he explained, is not a trap. It is the city exhale. It will carry us to the next stable point if we step onto it with trust, not resistance. Their progress became a silent, careful dance. They learned to read the stone instructions, stepping onto platforms of condensed mist only when the pillar glyphs confirmed their stability, letting deceptive whirlwinds pass harmlessly by as they waited for the true inscribed current. It was a lesson in humility and observation. They used no magic of their own, only the patient application of logic and a willingness to listen to the architecture. When they finally emerged from the last curtain of mist onto a broad, solid landing platform of white stone, the air cleared. Before them stood a trio of sky mages, their robes the color of a clear noon sky, their expressions unreadable but no longer hostile. The test had been passed. They had proven their intent was not conquest, but consultation. Admitted into the cloud-wreathed spires of Etheris, the atmosphere was one of quiet, focused urgency. The city was breathtaking, a symphony of floating gardens and libraries, open to the vast blue, but no one paused to admire the view. Every scholar and mage they passed was preoccupied studying complex orreries that modeled not just planets, but layers of reality, or scouring scrolls filled with dense celestial calculations. The tension here was not of impending conflict, but of a looming, inevitable equation. A senior archivist, her eyes reflecting the flickering light of a star chart, confirmed their gravest suspicion. The disturbances you map on the ground, we chart in the heavens. The silent cracks are not random. They align with a celestial convergence, a rare alignment that will peak in a matter of weeks. When it does, the harmonic strain will not simply spread. It will focus. The world song will be pulled taut, and if its chords are still unbalanced, the foundational melody will not simply fray. It will cease. The astral chamber was a sphere of night held within the heart of Etheris, its walls a living map of the cosmos. Here, Elion stood before the sky conclave, their faces illuminated by the slow dance of distant suns. He did not speak alone. He presented a triad of proof. The volatile shard pulsed on a central plinth, its light jagged. Beside it, Lyra placed a geode from the Everwood roots, its interior crystalline structure visibly warped by harmonic strain. An elder Phelan, his voice a low rumble, offered not an object, but a song memory, a haunting melody the forest had whispered of a great silence that once fell. Our cities see only our own reflections in this crisis, Elion said, his gaze moving across the assembled mages. We have mapped the symptom on the ground and charted its trigger in the sky. But to heal the patient, we must find the source of the imbalance. I propose a unified ritual, a scrying that uses all our arts, stellar, terrestrial, and living memory, to see not just the cracks, but where they are gathering to break. The conclave leader, Archmage Silos, a figure who seemed woven from starlight and patience, studied the evidence. His silence was heavier than any objection. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of confirmed dread. Our observatories have seen the convergence. You are correct that the fractures are focusing. But their target is not Luminara, nor Sylvan Weave, nor Etheris. The epicenter is the echoing vault. The name fell into the chamber like a stone into a still pool, sending ripples of palpable unease through even the most disciplined mages. The echoing vault was not just a ruin. It was the first city, the primordial forge where the world's song was first given shape by the ancient ones. It was sealed by solemn oath millennia ago, its location stricken from all but the most secret records. A place of unparalleled power and of a silence so profound it was considered a spiritual danger. Immediately, the fragile coalition strained. For some, the vault was a sacred memorial site, not to be disturbed. For others, it was a solemn reminder of a foundational transition their civilization had chosen to leave behind. Old stories, whispers about the nature of such places and the echoes they hold, resurfaced in heated conversation. To propose journeying there was not just risky, it was to many unthinkable, a questioning of the most ancient understandings that had allowed the elven realms to flourish separately. The unity forged in the Everwood Grove now faced its truest test, against the deep, instinctual pull of tradition. Seeing the alliance waver on the brink of dissolving back into fear, Elion made a decision that shifted all responsibility onto his own shoulders. Then I will go, he stated, his voice clear and calm in the tense chamber. A small expedition under my leadership. We will seek the source and, if possible, a solution. By this act, the cities bear no direct responsibility. If it questions ancient law, the question is mine alone. It was a vow of profound personal risk, a way to protect the newborn alliance by containing the weight of the taboo. He was offering himself as a focal point for both the physical and cultural challenge. The mission transformed in that moment. It was no longer a simple repair. It was an exploration of deep history, a journey to understand the very origin of their world's melody, to comprehend what had shifted so fundamentally at the beginning that it now threatened the present harmony. They were not just mending cracks, they were preparing to approach a door sealed by their own ancestors, unsure if they would find a key for the future or an echo from a distant, complex past. In the end, a team was assembled in quiet resolve. Lyra would rid the stone of that ancient place. Kaelin, the young singer from Sylvan, would listen for any lingering trace of the first living song. And from Etheris, a skilled navigator versed in forgotten star paths would join them. Archmage Silos, bound by law not to sanction the journey, provided a different kind of aid, a sleek, agile sky ship from a decommissioned observatory fleet, its enchantments tuned for silence and stealth over speed. As the first true night fell over the floating city, the small craft departed, not upward toward the stars, but outward, descending into the shrouded, forgotten reaches of the world below, where the maps ended and the oldest stories began. The skyship's hum faded to a whisper as they entered the cloud canyons. These were not formations of water vapor, but of congealed silence and old magic, towering walls of gray mist that swallowed sound and light. Archmage Selos' coordinates were less a map and more a sequence of remembered sensations, a list of star positions from an age when these peaks scraped a different sky. Elion guided the vessel with a delicate touch, its enchanted crystals flickering uncertainly. Around them, the world grew quiet in a way that felt heavy, a blanket smothering not just noise, but the very sense of being alive. This was the approach to the echoing vault, and it defended itself by making visitors feel profoundly, unsettlingly small. Then the instruments died. The glowing runes on the control panel winked out one by one, not with a spark, but with a weary fade, as if the energy was simply being forgotten. The gentle thrum of the levitation enchantments stuttered, causing the craft to lurch downward into a sickening drop before Elion wrestled it level. They were flying blind in a literal and magical sense, the ship now a fragile shell of wood and crystal, held aloft by momentum and prayer. Kaelin, the sky mage, stared at his unresponsive navigation stones, his usual confidence replaced by a cold sweat. The magic here was not weak, it was absent, a void that their refined arts could not fill. The landing was a controlled crash. Lyra, her face pressed to the viewing port, called out readings of the rock below not from a dial, but from her own innate sense of the stone's song. Left a shelf, she urged, her voice tight. It feels solid, ancient. Elion banked the shuddering ship, its hull groaning in protest as it skimmed the side of a jagged spire. They touched down on a narrow ledge with a jarring impact that rattled teeth and sent unused crystal components skittering across the deck. For a long moment, no one moved, listening to the creak of cooling metal and the absolute, deafening silence that pressed in from outside. This silence was the first true challenge. It was not peaceful. It was a presence, a watchful emptiness that seemed to drink their whispered words and anxious breaths. Strange gravity wells tugged at them as they disembarked, making a simple step feel like wading through thick water or causing a sudden, dizzying lightness. Echoes of old, unfinished spells lingered in the air, not as sounds, but as phantom sensations. A sudden chill, a fleeting scent of ozone, a brief, irrational spike of feeling that came from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. It was a landscape that challenged perception itself. "We cannot trust the devices," Lyra stated, her boots crunching on the gray, lifeless scree. Her hand rested on the cold mountain face. The stone remembers a path, even if the magic does not. It will hold us when the air will not. She argued for proceeding on foot, using her deep earth senses as their sole guide. It was a daunting proposal. It meant leaving their only means of escape, a ship that might never fly again, and venturing deeper into a zone that nullified everything they relied upon. But to stay was to be stranded. To go forward was to be truly, utterly isolated, with no promise of a swift rescue if the mountain itself turned against them. The decision was made in shared, solemn silence. They gathered what simple supplies they could carry: water, journey bread, ropes, and Lyra's geomancer's toolkit. Each step away from the sky ship felt like a step off the edge of the known world. The oppressive quiet deepened, broken only by the scuff of their boots and the rhythm of their own heartbeats, which now seemed too loud. The silence suggested not emptiness, but a profound patience, as if the mountain had been waiting for them, or for anyone curious enough to seek its secrets. Lyra led, her eyes often closed, her fingers trailing along rock faces, reading textures and tensions invisible to the others. She guided them through a labyrinth of razor-edged crevices and over bridges of natural stone, always choosing the path that felt most deeply rooted, most eternally still. After hours of tense, silent travel, the canyon walls opened abruptly. Before them rose a seamless, obsidian mountain face, so polished it reflected their own weary, small forms back at them. And at its base was the entrance. It was not an arch or a gate. It was a pool of absolute darkness set into the rock, a doorway that seemed made not of stone, but of solidified shadow and the weight of 10,000 years of memory. It did not invite them in. It simply existed, a perfect void in the world, waiting for them to choose to step into its echo. The entrance was a perfect absence, a geometric void that seemed to swallow the very idea of light. Elion approached, not with a tool, but with a dawning realization. This was no lock to be picked. It was a memory, solidified. To ask it to open was to prove you remembered the moment of its making. The portal required the first hymn, the original architectural song, from which every elven city was a later, varied verse. It was the foundational blueprint, sung into being by those who came before. And not a single one of them knew it. A quiet truth settled over the group. Millennia of proud separation had a cost. Luminara guarded the stanzas of brilliant dawn. Sylvan, we've preserved the verses of deep, rooted growth. Etheris held the chords of boundless sky. Each city possessed only a fragment, a piece of the whole melody, believing their portion was the heart of the song. To open the way, they would have to sing together, weaving their broken pieces into a temporary, hopeful whole. The silence of the canyon made the idea feel like a shout in a sacred space. Singing here, into that consuming darkness, felt less like a key and more like a quiet offering. As Lyra began the low, earthy hum of Sylvan Weave's fragment, the entrance did something unexpected. It drank the sound. The notes did not echo. They were absorbed, the dark surface rippling faintly as if sensing the truth of their origin. A false note, a lie in the harmony, would not simply fail. The ancient protections woven into this place would likely interpret it as a corruption to be answered with overwhelming force. Their trial was one of authenticity, not just skill. Elion closed his eyes, listening to the three disparate melodies. He heard not just the notes, but the principles behind them, the architectural intent. The soaring ambition of light, the patient resilience of the root, the boundless perspective of the sky. His mind, trained to see the structure in all things, began to work. He raised his hands as if conducting an invisible orchestra. "Start with the root," he whispered to Lyra. "Let it be the foundation. Then, Kalen, weave the sky as the canopy. I will bind them with the light of the dawn." He did not know the missing notes. He used his deep understanding of how all elven craft interconnected, building bridges of logic and intuition between their three city songs. His voice joined theirs, not leading with dominance, but weaving with a conductor's grace, trying to create a chord that felt true to the spirit, if not the perfect letter, of the lost first hymn. The entrance responded. The void shimmered, not into light, but into a substance like solidified mist, pearlescent and shifting. An archway formed, but it did not swing wide. It remained a narrow, reluctant passage, just wide enough for them to enter single file. It was not an invitation, but a concession. Their song had been pure in its intent, a genuine effort to remember together. It was enough for the ancient guardians to grant entry, but the limited opening was a clear, silent message. The truth inside was not meant for casual eyes. It would demand more than a harmonized fragment. It would demand understanding. Crossing the threshold was like stepping through a curtain of cold, still water. The oppressive external silence vanished, replaced by a soft, pervasive hum, and before them, the echoing vault was revealed. It was not a ruin of collapsed stone and dust. It was a preserved echo of the first city, held in a bubble of suspended time. Towers of impossible, fluid geometry spiraled upwards, gardens of crystal flowers glimmered with internal light, and silent fountains hung in mid-arc, their droplets frozen like diamonds. Everything was here, pristine, beautiful, and utterly, profoundly still. It was a museum of a moment, the instant the ancient ones had finished their work and then, for reasons now lost, chosen to walk away, leaving this perfect creation to its eternal, silent vigil. The air held the scent of ozone and petrified blossoms, and the only sound was the hum of the memory itself, playing on a loop for eternity. They had passed the first test. Now they stood inside the question. The spectral architects moved through the frozen city, like memories given gentle form. They were not ghosts of individuals, but echoes of the act of creation itself, their translucent hands tracing the lines of a tower, here adjusting the flow of an energy channel there. As Elion and his companions followed, they saw the story of the first song, not as a legend, but as a recorded event. The echo constructs were not building a city from stone and magic. They were weaving a harmony into the fabric of the world, anchoring a single perfect chord of existence into a physical form. That form was the primordial Keystone. It waited in the central atrium, a chamber whose ceiling was a depiction of the first night sky. The Keystone itself was a crystal of impossible geometry, not resting on a pedestal, but hanging in the air at the chamber's heart, slowly rotating. It pulsed with a soft rainbow light, and from its core, the music of reality seemed to emanate a low, beautiful hum that was the baseline of every elven song ever sung. But it was wounded. Veining through its multifaceted depths were the same black silent cracks they had seen, marking the continent pulsing with a dull, hollow absence. This was not a new injury. The cracks were ancient, a hairline, flaw in the foundation of everything. The understanding that settled over them was both awe-inspiring and profound. The great cities were not independent wonders. They were resonators. Luminara, Solar Spire, Sylvan Weave's Heart Tree, Etheris' Sky Pillars, they were magnificent instruments. But the music they played was an echo, a variation drawn from this single original source. Luminara's relentless pursuit of eternal dawn had not created the flaw. It had, like a singer holding one note too long and too loud, stressed the ancient weakness at the song's very heart, causing the silent fracture to begin its slow spread. Elder Phelan approached the Keystone, his usual sternness replaced by a look of deep reflection. "We cannot repair a crack in the first note of creation," he said, his voice barely a whisper in the humming chamber. "To try would be to rewrite the song itself, and we cannot destroy it. To silence the Keystone would be to quiet the world song forever. Every city, every spell, every growing thing touched by our harmony would simply fade." The choice seemed impossible, a balance between a slow unraveling and a sudden end. Then Phelan turned, and his eyes held a spark, not of desperation, but of a gardener's patient insight. "We do not mend the root," he proposed. "We change the soil around it. If the flaw is in the Keystone's core frequency, we do not attack the frequency. We surround it with a new, stronger harmony." A choir of all three city types, singing in perfect unison here at the source, could create a buffer of pure song. It would not erase the crack, but it would hold it in stasis, prevent its resonance from spreading further. It would be a gentle reset, not of the Keystone, but of how the world listens to it. The scale of the plan was breathtaking. It would require a ritual of 4 parts, performed simultaneously across impossible distances. A choir here in the echoing vault to cradle the source, and a matching choir in each of the 3 great cities, their spires, trees, and pillars perfectly attuned to the buffer frequency. The synchronization had to be flawless. A delay of a single breath, a note sung with doubt, and the harmonic buffer would collapse, likely shocking the Keystone and accelerating the end. It was a task that demanded not just skill, but absolute unwavering trust between realms that had lived in proud isolation for ages. As they began to formulate the plan, assigning roles and frequencies, the vault itself gave them a final urgent warning. The frozen droplet in a distant fountain fell shattering on the silent pool below with a sound like glass. A crystal flower in a suspended garden lost its glow, turning gray and brittle. The echo constructs around them flickered, their forms becoming unstable, their guiding gestures faltering into static. The destabilization was no longer a distant threat. It was here at the origin, eroding the memory of creation itself. They had theorized, they had planned, but now the last sanctuary was failing. There was no more time for debate, no room for second guessing. The world's song was fading, and the only chance to preserve it required a harmony more perfect and united than any their people had ever dared to attempt. The hum of the vault held a new purpose now, a carrier wave for a hopeful signal. Kalen, the Sky Mage, found the heart of the Echo Messenger system, not a device, but a convergence point in the chamber where light and sound had been woven into a permanent recording. His task was to reverse its flow, to turn a memory into a transmission, using the principles of Etheris and the raw harmonic energy of the Keystone itself. He began to weave a fragile thread of communication, a single strand of coherent song meant to stretch across the continent to 3 specific points: the Solar Spire, the Heart Tree, and the Sky Pillar. It was like trying to shout a complex symphony down a hallway filled with howling wind. The link was unstable, flickering in and out of coherence. The message they sent, the detailed plan for the harmonic reset, did not arrive in the cities as a clear instruction. It arrived as a broken, urgent plea, a series of luminous runes that shimmered into being and faded, accompanied by a harmonic sequence that sounded like a melody played on a cracked bell. The leaders in each city received not a blueprint, but a puzzle, a call to action built on faith and half-heard truths. In the radiant command nexus of Luminara, Captain Valeria watched the fragmented message manifest above her strategic table. The runes were Elion's script. The harmonic signature was undeniably from a place of profound power, but the Council's official stance still branded him a traitor and the vault a forbidden myth. Her loyalty to the chain of command, the very structure that had given her purpose, warred with the evidence before her eyes and the deep, unsettling tremors that now occasionally passed through the city's foundations. She had seen the map of silent cracks in the Grove Heart vision. She knew the faction on her council, pushing for more aggressive harmonic controls, was operating from fear, not wisdom. The choice became clear: obey the orders of a faltering hierarchy, or answer the plea for her people's future. Her decision was quiet, decisive, and complete. She summoned only her most trusted guardians, those she had served with for centuries, and gave them new orders. They were to secure the Solar Spire's ritual chamber, not against an external threat, but against any interference from their own government. It was a protective measure, a quiet stand taken not for control of the city, but for the chance to preserve it. The stakes of the coming ritual were absolute. The plan was a harmonic house of cards. The buffer song had to be generated simultaneously at 4 points: the 3 great cities and the echoing vault itself. If any one location failed to join at the precise moment, if their note was a fraction too early or late, or sung with a heart clouded by doubt, the carefully constructed interference pattern would collapse. The backfire would resonate directly back into the flawed Keystone like a sonic hammer, likely shattering the primordial crystal instantly. The consequence would be an immediate, total silence, the world's song ending not with a whisper, but with a snap. Every city, every spell, every leaf that grew to an elven melody would simply cease. Success required 4 acts of perfect faith, performed independently across a continent, by people who had minutes before been strangers, allies, or even enemies. Back within the silent, frozen beauty of the vault, the small team made their own preparations. There were no armies to command, no complex machinery to calibrate. Their task was the most intimate and the most vast, to be the anchor point, the first voice in the quartet. They cleared a space before the pulsing, wounded Keystone, and each began the inner work of focus. Lyra touched the cold floor, feeling for the deepest, most stable bedrock to ground her song. Kalen aligned his breathing with the residual star patterns on the ceiling. Elion stood between them, his eyes on the ancient crystal, ready to weave their individual melodies into the unified buffer chord. They knew the messages had been sent. They did not know if they had been believed, or if their friends and former foes now moved in the distant cities. All they could do was trust, and be ready to sing the first note of a new harmony, hoping that 3 answering voices would rise from across the world to meet them. The appointed hour arrived not with a fanfare, but with a held breath. Elion, Lyra, and Elder Phalon took their places at the points of a triangle around the wounded Primordial Keystone. There was no countdown, only a shared, silent nod. Then they began to sing. Elion's voice carried the clear, brilliant melody of Luminara, the song of dawn captured in crystal. Lyra's hum was the deep, patient rhythm of Sylvan weave, the song of roots and resilient growth. Phalon's tone was the vast, open harmony of Etheris, the song of boundless sky. They did not sing in unison, but in counterpoint, 3 distinct city songs weaving together into a single, complex chord, aimed directly at the heart of the ancient crystal. Across the continent, their call was answered. In Luminara, within the secured chamber of the Solar Spire, Captain Valeria stood with her loyal mages. They did not unleash the spire's raw power. Instead, they focused it, refining the blazing energy into a beam of pure, resonant harmony, a note of light meant to illuminate, not dominate. In Sylvan weave, every singer, from the youngest novice to the eldest elder, placed their hands upon the bark of the heart tree or the living soil, their combined song of growth and renewal amplified through the great tree, becoming a verdant pulse that strengthened the roots of the world. High above, in the floating spires of Etheris, the sky conclave wove their celestial melody into the very winds, directing currents of magic to carry the harmony to its destination. The response from the Keystone was immediate and intense. It did not accept the healing song passively. The dark cracks within it flared, emitting jagged pulses of discordant energy, waves of sonic distortion that felt like a heavy pressure. The beautiful, frozen chamber of the vault shook, and phantom echoes of the first city's towers shimmered unsteadily. For the singers, the strain was acute, a searing vibration in their bones that threatened to shatter their focus. Each pulse was a whisper of emptiness, a temptation to doubt, to break the song and end the struggle. Lyra's knees buckled, but her hands remained pressed to the floor, her song unwavering. Phalon's aged frame trembled, yet his voice, though strained, held the steady pitch of the sky. At the triangle's focal point, Elion bore the brunt of the storm. The conflicting energies converged on him, the architect of this desperate plan. The logical solution, the instinct of his training, was to try and overpower the corruption, to shout it down with a purer, louder note. But in that maelstrom of sound and pressure, he remembered the silent cracks spreading across the continent, the result of one note overwhelming all others. He understood then that eradication was the old way, the path that had led them here. So he made a different choice, the ultimate architect's decision. He stopped trying to fight the flaw. Instead, he opened his awareness fully to it, listening not to the beautiful harmony they were creating, but to the fractured, broken note at its core. He heard its frequency, its place in the broken chord, and he began to weave it in. With immense, careful precision, he adjusted the trio's song, bending their perfect harmony just enough to make space for the dissonance. He did not try to fix the cracked note. He accepted it, integrating its fractured resonance into the new, larger structure of the song. It was an act of profound humility, acknowledging that the foundation of their world was not, and never had been, perfect. True strength was not in flawless purity, but in resilient wholeness. That act of integration was the key. The intense pulses from the Keystone did not cease, but their character changed. The jagged discord softened, blending into the broader melody. Then, a miracle of subtle transformation occurred. The dark cracks, threading the crystal, began to glow from within, not with a harsh light, but with a soft, steady silver luminescence. They were no longer open wounds. They had become lasting marks, lines of mended strength, etched into the heart of creation, a permanent record of a fragility, acknowledged and embraced. A new chord, stable and deeply resonant, locked into place. It was not the first song restored to its mythical perfection. It was something new, a second song, built upon the foundation of the first, but stronger for its acknowledged flaw. This chord resonated outward from the Keystone, a visible wave of calm, silver energy that washed through the echoing vault. The shaking stopped. The frozen droplets in the fountains, the crystal flowers, the echo constructs, all glimmered with a hint of that same soft light, as if remembering they were part of a living story, not a forgotten museum. The wave did not stop at the vault's entrance. It expanded across the world, following the ley lines and harmonic pathways, a gentle tide of realignment. In Luminara, the Solar Spire's light softened to a more sustainable, gentle dawn. In Sylvan weave, the brittle edges on the great leaves regained a hint of green vitality. In Etheris, the chaotic magical currents smoothed into predictable, navigable flows. The silent cracks across the continent, from the deepest canyon to the highest peak, sealed not by being erased, but by being filled with this new, accepting harmony. They became faint, silver tracings on the world, reminders but not threats, as the last echoes of the second song faded into a peaceful, sustaining hum. The effort of its birth became terribly clear. The energy required to channel that transformation had been immense. Lyra slumped forward, caught by Kalen, her strength utterly spent. Elder Phelan leaned heavily on his staff, his breathing labored. And at the center, Elion slowly lowered his hands. He looked at the Keystone, now pulsing with a calm, integrated light, its silver marks a testament to their choice. A profound exhaustion settled into him, deeper than any physical weariness. He had succeeded. The world's song was saved, changed, but enduring. Yet as the adrenaline faded, he felt the cost of being the lens, the conductor, for such a monumental shift. The silence that followed was no longer oppressive, but it was heavy with consequence, and with the quiet, uncertain question of what comes after the saving of everything. The new harmony settled like a deep, restorative breath into the bones of the world. In the echoing vault, the violent tremors ceased, replaced by a profound and peaceful stillness. The primordial keystone hung in its chamber, no longer straining, its dark fractures now filled with a soft, silver luminescence that pulsed in time with a slow, steady heartbeat. Across the continent, the great silent cracks sealed in the same instant, leaving behind only faint, beautiful traceries of light upon mountain faces and forest floors, not as scars, but as permanent reminders of a fragility embraced. The reset was a success. The song was saved, but the effort of singing that saving note was written upon those who had channeled it. In the chamber, the final resonant chord faded, and with it went the last of their strength. Lyra slumped to the floor, her hands still resting on the stone, her breathing shallow. Elder Phelan leaned heavily on his staff, every line of his face etched with the exhaustion of centuries, condensed into a single moment. And Elion simply stood, then slowly knelt, as if the weight of the entire symphony now rested quietly within him. He was alive, but profoundly altered. The act of weaving the flaw into the song, of serving as the living conduit for the second song's birth, had changed him at a fundamental level. His physical form, once robust with a builder's vitality, now required a careful, measured grace in every movement. Yet his spirit seemed amplified. His eyes, when he opened them, held a new depth, glowing with the faint, steady light of integrated starlight, as if he now carried a quiet reflection of the mended Keystone within his gaze. The silence that followed was not the ominous quiet of before, but it was heavy with a new, practical problem. They were triumphant architects of a new age, and they were utterly stranded. Their sky ship sat broken on a remote ledge, its enchantments quieted by the vault's enduring null field. The political landscape they would return to was an unanswered question. Would the councils of Luminara see their act as salvation or further transgression? Would the newfound unity shatter upon contact with old pride and fear? They were not returning as conquering heroes, but as weary messengers carrying a difficult, beautiful truth. The world's stability now required continuous cooperation, not isolated supremacy. It was Kalen, the young sky mage from Etheris, who refused to let their journey end on this silent mountain. While the others rested, he crawled into the disabled ship's crystal housing, his own energy nearly spent. The complex star-charting cores were fried, beyond any hope of quick repair, but he remembered a simpler principle, the resonance that had just saved everything. With Lyra's help, he took the small, once warped geode from the Everwood roots and a tiny, harmless fragment of crystal that had fallen from the Keystone's outer layer after the healing. Using the last dregs of his skill, he encouraged them to grow together, not through complex magic, but through the gentle, persistent hum of the New World song itself. The result was not a powerful navigational crystal, but a simple resonant battery, a piece of the unified harmony given solid form. When he slotted it into the ship's core, the vessel did not roar to life. It awakened with a soft, healthy hum, its basic levitation and guidance functions restored. It was enough. Their ascent from the mountains was slow and quiet, the ship climbing on wings of whispered song. They looked down as the cloud canyons fell away, no longer seeing a world on the brink of silence, but one marked with delicate silver lines of resilience. They were not flying home as fugitives, nor were they returning as self-proclaimed heroes. They were something else entirely, living bridges. Each of them carried within their very being the proof of a necessary synthesis. Elion with the light of dawn and accepted Flaw, Lyra with the deep-root connection, Kalen with the sky's perspective, and Phelan with the elder's memory. Together, they were the embodied argument for the future, a future where the greatness of any city could only be measured by the health of the whole choir. The true test would not be in the healing of the Keystone, but in the healing of old suspicions, as their fragile ship turned its nose toward the gleaming spires of home, carrying the quiet, revolutionary idea that eternity is not found in perfect, isolated light, but in a balanced, shared song. The sky ship descended toward Luminara under a gentler dawn. The light that washed over the city's crystalline towers was no longer a piercing, eternal glare. but a soft, golden radiance that cast long, warm shadows and made the spires gleam rather than blaze. Below, a crowd had gathered in the central plaza, not in celebration, but in a hushed, uncertain silence. The Council of Luminara stood on the grand dais, but its unity was shattered. Captain Valeria stood apart, flanked by her loyal guardians, while several other council members were conspicuously absent, their seats empty and their actions exposed by the evidence she had secured during the ritual. The city was in a state of profound disarray, its political heart laid bare just as its spiritual one had been healed. Elion stepped from the ship, and a ripple passed through the crowd. He looked different, marked by an inner light that softened the edges of his weariness. In his hands, he did not carry a weapon or a scroll of laws. He held the transformed Keystone shard, the very crystal he had once taken in desperation. It no longer pulsed with chaotic energy. Now, it glowed with a steady, integrated silver light, its dark fractures filled with that resilient luminescence. He did not raise it in triumph. He simply held it aloft, a quiet, undeniable symbol. "This is not what was lost," he said, his voice carrying on the new, calm air. "This is what we have gained. A foundation that acknowledges its flaw is stronger than one that denies it. Our light does not diminish by sharing its spectrum. It becomes part of a greater dawn." The consequence of this revelation was immediate and practical. In the days that followed, a provisional alliance council was formed. It was an unprecedented body, with Captain Valeria representing Luminara's renewed guardianship, Elder Phalon bringing the deep-rooted wisdom of Sylvan weave, and Archmage Silos offering the far-seeing perspective of Etheris. Their first and only mandate was to govern the inter-city harmony, to monitor the health of the world's song, and to ensure no single note ever again threatened to drown out the chorus. It was a government of balance, not of power, yet not all saw this new light as a blessing. A faction of traditionalists within Luminara, their identities tied to the city's former, blinding supremacy, viewed the Solar Spire's softened glow as a profound shift. They gathered in murmuring groups, protesting what they called the dimming of their glory. To them, the gentle, shared light was a dilution of their identity, a lowering of their prestige before the other realms. This conflict was not violent, but it was deep, a cultural tension that would take generations to fully ease. The security of the future was not guaranteed by the healed Keystone alone. It would be forged in the daily choices of individuals to embrace a shared identity over an isolated one. Amidst this political reshaping, Elion made his own decision clear. When offered his old post as Master Architect, he declined with a respectful bow. "My work within a single spire is complete," he stated. "The greater architecture now is the space between us." He announced the founding of a new order, the Harmonious Architects. They would be itinerant builders and teachers, journeying between Luminara, Sylvan weave, and Etheris. Their task would be to weave the principles of the second song into new constructions, to repair old structures with the understanding of balance, and to teach each new generation that true creation strengthens the whole network, not just a single node. As Elion prepared to depart for Sylvan weave to lay the foundations of this new order, Lyra watched him from the edge of the plaza. She had spent her life listening to the deep stone, and now she heard a new melody in her own spirit. The quiet scholar of the roots was gone, transformed by the journey into a bridge in her own right. She made her decision. She would not return to the secluded archives of the Everwood. She would join the Harmonious architects, offering her knowledge of the earth, song to ensure that every new structure, no matter how brilliant, remained grounded in the enduring resilience of the world. Her choice was a silent vow, a promise that the alliance would be built not just on treaties, but on shared purpose, one journey at a time. Lyra's declaration was not a casual offer, but a vow etched into the bedrock of her spirit. She would join the Harmonious architects as their first stone singer. For her, the deep earth connections were not a secondary skill. They were the essential counterweight to the soaring ambition of light, the grounding melody without which any new song would eventually drift into dissonance. Her partnership with Elion would make them co-founders, a living fusion of Sylvan Weave's roots and Luminara's dawn. This was the philosophy of the New Age made flesh, a daily demonstration that balance was not a theory debated in councils, but a practice built by two sets of hands. One understood crystal lattices, and the other listened to the whispers of stone. The personal cost of this choice was a quiet private transition, saying farewell to Sylvan Weave, to the familiar hum of the heart tree and the soft moss underfoot, was a profound change. She was not merely leaving a city, she was leaving a part of her own identity, the scholar who preferred the company of silent archives and deep caverns. Furthermore, the practical work ahead promised a beautiful challenge, integrating her intuitive earthy methods, where a builder listened to a stone's nature and guided its form, with Luminara's tradition of precise geometric light architecture would be a constant conversation. Could a foundation be both a mathematically perfect anchor and a responsive living root? Their partnership would have to find the answer one stone, one crystal at a time. Their first project as co-founders was chosen with deliberate symbolism. They would travel not to Luminara or Sylvan Weave, but to Etheris. The floating city's magic was majestic, but untethered, its wisdom drawn from stars and winds, often at the expense of connection to the world below. Elion and Lyra proposed to help the sky mages establish a new grounded observatory. This would not be a tower reaching up, but a structure reaching down. Its foundations would be woven into the mountain peak, upon which Etheris floated, designed to harmonize celestial observation with terrestrial stability. It was to be a literal and symbolic bridge, anchoring the sky city's perspective to the enduring patience of the earth. The stakes for this initial endeavor could not be higher. They were no longer emergency responders, saving the world from imminent collapse. They were now institution builders, and every eye across the three realms was upon them. Success would prove the viability of the Harmonious architects, lending credibility to the fragile Alliance Council and inspiring others to cross the old cultural divides. A setback, however, would be noted by traditionalists and skeptics in every city as a question of whether the old separate ways were more reliable. A poorly integrated observatory, a structure that fought its sight or failed to function, would not just be a simple error. It would become a point of concern for those uneasy with the new harmony, a moment for a return to isolation. The future of their order and the cooperative spirit it embodied would be forged in the stone and light of this single careful construction. With their plans set and a new shared purpose to guide them, their gaze shifted. They looked beyond the borders of the three great cities toward the vast and wild places that lay between. In those untamed spaces where the world's song was not shaped by spires or heart trees, perhaps new forms of architecture waited to be discovered. These would be born not from a single tradition, but from the uncharted harmony of the world itself. The chosen site was a windswept plateau where the mists of the sky pillars met the first whispers of the everwood canopy. Here, the first physical bridge of the new age would be built, not as a fortress or a monument, but as an instrument. The Concord Spire began as a shared vision in the minds of architects, singers, and sky mages, but translating that vision into stone and song was a lesson in profound patience. The design itself was a constant negotiation. Luminara's mages insisted on flawless crystalline geometry for optimal light refraction. Sylvan Weave's singers argued for a framework of living, responsive sung wood that could grow with the site. Etheris's navigators demanded specific alignments to celestial currents. Every decision, from the angle of the foundation to the type of mortar, became a microcosm of the alliance itself, requiring explanations, adaptations, and sometimes the swallowing of pride. The work was painstaking, a daily symphony of clashing methods, slowly learning to harmonize. Tempers frayed when a section of sung wood, carefully grown over weeks, rejected the infusion of Luminaran light energy, warping and threatening to collapse. Frustration mounted as a perfectly calibrated crystal array failed to resonate with the local earth song, falling silent and dull. These were not simple engineering problems. They were cultural ones. Each near failure felt like a verdict, a whisper that the old, separate ways were inherently more stable. The pressure was immense, a quiet, grinding test of whether their hard-won unity could survive the mundane reality of shared labor. The true turning point came not from a success, but from a discovery, a central load-bearing crystal, shaped and polished by Luminara's finest artisans, developed a hairline fracture under stress. The immediate reaction from the city's mages was to remove and replace it, to excise the flaw as they once would have. Elion, studying the delicate fracture pattern in the afternoon light, saw a different possibility. He called for Lyra. "Do not remove it," he said. "Show the stone how to hold." Lyra approached, her skepticism clear, but she placed her hands on the cool crystal and then on the living wooden frame beside it. She did not try to heal the crystal. Instead, she began a low, coaxing song to a nearby root of the sung wood, encouraging it to grow not away from the flaw, but toward it. Slowly, tenderly, the living wood embraced the fractured crystal, weaving a lattice of strong, fibrous tendrils around it, not as a cage, but as a supportive net. The crystal remained flawed, but it was now held, its weakness integrated into a stronger, hybrid whole. This hybrid support, born of compromise rather than purity, became the spire's celebrated heart. It was a physical poem of their new philosophy. As construction continued, this spirit of adaptive synthesis spread. Crystals were grown with tiny channels for capillary roots. Wood was sung into forms that mirrored stellar angles. The final act was a chorus. At the moment of alignment, mages from all three cities channeled their respective harmonies, light, growth, and sky, into the apex. The Concord Spire awoke. It did not blaze. It glowed, a slender, elegant needle of integrated light, whose peak vanished into the low clouds, pulsing with a soft, silver-gold rhythm that echoed the mended Keystone's beat. It was a permanent harmonic relay, a tuning fork for the continent, its gentle resonance strengthening the world's song simply by standing as it did. The spire's inaugural light, shining across the plateau, was a quiet, profound answer to every doubter. Its beauty was undeniable, but its true strength was in its composition, a strength that could not have been achieved by any one city alone. It silenced the loudest critics, not with argument, but with existence. Yet as that new light pushed back the twilight, it did more than illuminate the gathered elves. It shone out into the wild, quiet places between the realms, a beacon of order and harmony in the untamed world. And from those deep, long undisturbed shadows, something ancient and long dormant registered the pulse of this new, stable song. The spire's light, meant to unite 3 cities, had just become a signal fire, announcing their renewed harmony to listeners they had not considered in ages. The work of building understanding among themselves was only the first step. Now, they might have to explain it to others. The Concord Spire's steady pulse was a beacon, but beacons are seen by more than just friends. From the furthest reaches of the Everwood, where the trees grew in patterns older than memory, and from the high, wind-scoured mesas beyond the sky pillars, the scouts returned with stories that unsettled the new peace. They spoke of places where the land itself was singing back, not with the familiar melodies of root or star, but with a third, forgotten harmony, elegant and alien. In hidden valleys, structures of petrified wood and solidified moonlight, long dormant, were humming to life, their forms reacting to the continent's newly stabilized song. These were not ruins, they were sleeping instruments, and the second song was a gentle hand, waking them up. The discovery sent a ripple of profound awe and deep unease through the Alliance Council. It suggested a history far more complex than their 3-city narrative, a lost fourth branch of elven culture that had woven its architecture not from crystal, tree, or cloud, but from the raw substance of dreams and time. The debate that followed was tense and fundamental. Some, like Archmage Silos, argued for immediate, respectful study. To ignore this awakening was to willfully blind themselves to a part of their own shared heritage, a chapter of their story waiting to be read. Others, particularly cautious voices from Luminara, urged restraint. What if this lost culture's understanding was based on principles they could not comprehend? Or what if their long isolation had fostered a perspective too different to easily bridge? The concern was not of conflict, but of a mirror that might show a reflection they did not recognize, a society built on values that could challenge their fragile unity. The safest path, they argued, was to observe from a distance, to let the sleeping past rest. But the question hung in the council chamber, heavy as stone. Could a true harmony be built on a foundation of deliberate ignorance? Elion and Lyra listened, and their decision was a quiet echo of their first journey. They did not demand, they volunteered. The Concord Spire, they pointed out, was not just a symbol, it was a tool. Its harmonic resonance could be tuned, not to shout, but to whisper a specific, gentle query, a diplomatic overture in the language of pure song. They proposed a small expedition, just the 2 of them and a single Etherian navigator, to follow that whispered query to its source. It would be a mission of first contact, not conquest, of listening before speaking. After long deliberation, the council gave its cautious, anxious blessing. The potential for a greater, more diverse unity was too profound to ignore, but the delegation was kept small for a reason. If things went wrong, the risk would be contained. Venturing beyond the mapped territories was a journey into a different kind of wilderness. Here, the natural laws they understood seemed softened, as if reality itself was more receptive to thought and feeling. Gravity became a suggestion near certain rock formations. Light pooled in clearings like liquid, and sound traveled in slow, visible waves. It was a landscape where the rules of Luminaran geometry, or Sylvan weaves, arboreal logic simply did not apply. Their guide was the subtle pull from the tuning crystal Lyra carried, a fragment attuned to the spire's query. It led them deeper into a region where the forest underwent a breathtaking change. The trees were no longer organic, random growths. They stood in perfect, glowing geometric formations, hexagons and spirals of luminous bark, their canopies trimmed into crystalline lattices that filtered the sun into precise, dancing patterns on the forest floor. This was not architecture imposed upon nature. It was nature itself, dreaming in perfect, intelligent shapes. And then, the forest opened into a valley. What lay within was not a city, as any of them had ever defined it. There were no towers, no walls, no streets. The valley was the city. Great, translucent structures rose from the ground like solidified auroras, their forms fluid and ever so subtly shifting, reflecting the emotions of the few, graceful figures they could glimpse moving within. Bridges of coherent light spanned chasms, and gardens of fragrant, musical flowers grew in harmonic clusters that changed color with the time of day. This was a place that seemed built not by hand, but by collective imagination, a city dreamed into existence and held in place by a shared, profound will. The air thrummed with a powerful, serene melody, the source of the third harmony. They stood at the edge, the representatives of a world of solid stone and fixed light, looking into a realm where the very boundary between thought and form had been gently dissolved. The city of Evendell did not simply occupy the valley. It was the valley's dream of itself. Elion, Lyra, and their guide stood at the threshold of a reality where thought had weight and memory had shape. The structures around them were not built, but manifested, their walls flowing like slow liquid crystal, their spires subtly reshaping as if breathing to a rhythm of collective meditation. Here, architecture was not a testament against time, but a conversation with it, a malleable tapestry woven from shared memory and quiet desire. The Dreamweaver elves moved among these forms with a serene, fluid grace, their very presence seeming to influence the gentle shifts in their surroundings. Their long isolation was not an accident of history, but a chosen path, a deep dive into the subconscious layer of existence, where the world song's emotional resonance was most pure. They had been the silent, steadfast guardians of the song's heart, its feeling, while the other cities tended to its physical notes. The revelation that followed reshaped history itself. The original schism, the event that scattered the elves into their separate realms, was not a catastrophic falling out as the archives had suggested. The Dreamweavers shared, through a complex tapestry of projected imagery and empathetic resonance, that it had been a conscious, philosophical divergence. One group sought to give the song perfect, enduring form in crystal and light. Another chose to root it in the living, growing world. A third aimed to chart its boundless possibilities in the sky. And the Dreamweavers chose to dwell within the song's source, to become stewards of the imagination from which it all sprang. There was no ancient conflict, only a solemn agreement to explore different verses of the same profound poem. This understanding was a balm and a challenge, reframing millennia of assumed separation, not as a tragedy to overcome, but as a long experiment now nearing its necessary synthesis. Communication, however, was a labyrinth of beautiful difficulty. The Dreamweavers did not think in blueprints, sheet music, or council decrees. Their language was one of symbols, archetypal emotions, and direct sensory exchange. When Elion tried to explain the harmonic principles through logical structures, they received not the theory, but the feeling of his focused determination, which they interpreted as a kind of rigid anxiety. When Lyra described the silent cracks as fractures in stone, they perceived the concept of deep, aching sorrow within the earth. Their very natures operated on different wavelengths. A simple request for directions could become a shared experience of the concept of journey, complete with fleeting visions of possible paths and their associated emotional tones. This was not misunderstanding born of hostility, but of fundamentally different ways of perceiving reality itself. Finding common ground required a shift from explanation to experience. Lyra, frustrated with words, knelt and placed her palms on the valley floor. Instead of describing geology, she opened her awareness and shared the feeling of stone's memory, the patient, eon-long recording of pressure and time, the deep warmth at the world's core. The Dreamweavers around her stilled, then their forms glowed with a soft, amber light. They understood this language perfectly. It was the sensation of foundational truth, a feeling akin to their own guardianship of primal emotions. Inspired, Elion approached a gently shifting wall of dream stuff. He did not try to stabilize it. With a lifetime of discipline, he focused his will and shaped a small, perfect, geometric lattice of light within the malleable material, a fleeting demonstration of intention given elegant, temporary form. The Dreamweavers observed this not as an imposition, but as a fascinating and beautiful act of focused dreaming. In that moment, the bridge was built, a span of mutual respect between the deep feeling of the earth and the disciplined beauty of form. This hard-won connection presented the ultimate test for the fledgling alliance. Integrating the Dreamweavers and their philosophy would require not just adding a new voice to the choir, but fundamentally expanding the definition of architecture, of community, of reality itself. Could a council that governed the harmony of physical structures also make space for a culture that considered emotion a building material and consensus a creative act? The stability of the new world depended on answering this question, not with laws, but with a deeper, more inclusive understanding. As a gesture of growing trust, the Dreamweavers invited their visitors to witness the central ritual of Evendel, the weaving of the reverie. In a vast open amphitheater where the ground was soft as thought, the community gathered not to sing a chord, but to dream a story. As they meditated in unison, the air above them shimmered, and the world's song was revealed not as a sequence of notes, but as a living, breathing narrative of light and shadow, connection and memory, growth and stillness. It was the song's meaning, its endless, evolving story, playing out in a silent, spectacular panorama above their heads. The tapestry shimmered above them, a living map of existence, woven from threads of pure meaning. Elion watched as a brilliant golden strand, Luminara's light, intertwined with a deep, verdant green of Sylvan weave's growth, both cradled by the boundless blue of Etheris' sky. And now they saw the fourth thread, a shimmering silver of potential and memory, the essence of Evendel, weaving through and between all the others, connecting their individual melodies into a single, breathtaking story. This was the world's song as they had never perceived it, not as a sequence of notes to be played, but as a narrative to be lived, a relationship between distinct voices that created something greater than anyone could alone. The revelation was humbling, true architectural eternity, the kind that outlasts empires and even mountains, was not found in crafting an unchanging monument. It was found here, in this dynamic, respectful interplay, a system strong precisely because it could adapt, because it welcomed new threads into the weave without unraveling the whole. This understanding, however, met with a deep-seated concern. The Dreamweavers, having shared the core of their being, now drew back from the implications. Their elder, a figure whose form seemed to shift between a wise old elf and a youthful sapling, spoke with a voice like distant wind chimes. Your cities are beautiful, but they are fixed. Your laws are written in stone and light. We are a people of the subtle shift, the changing thought. To join your alliance as you are would be to pour a river into a crystal vial. The shape is beautiful, but the river ceases to be a river. Their reluctance was not born of arrogance, but of a wish to preserve their essence. They feared a slow fading of their fluid nature under the weight of the other city's more structured, tangible logic. Elion listened, and in the shared silence of the dream space, a new idea was born, not as a compromise, but as a new form of architecture entirely. He did not ask the Dreamweavers to change. He proposed that the alliance itself must evolve. We will not ask you to come to us, he said, his words forming gentle images in the air between them. We will build gates not of stone, but of understanding, portals that resonate with the unique frequency of each city, allowing for the exchange of ideas, of energy, of art and song, without demanding that anyone leave their home or conform to a foreign way of being. They would be windows, not doors, permanent invitations to witness and share, but never to conquer or consume. He called them resonance gates. The ambition of the proposal was staggering. It required inventing principles that had never existed, a fusion of Dreamweaver fluidity, Luminaran precision, Sylvan weave's organic growth, and Etherian celestial alignment. They would need to design structures that were simultaneously stable gateways and responsive entities, capable of tuning themselves to the emotional and cultural currents flowing through them. This was no longer about repairing an old song, but about composing an entirely new movement within it, one that would define the next age of their civilization. The stakes were the very soul of their future unity, a chance to ensure that no city, no culture, would ever again be isolated in silence, that the tapestry would always have room for another thread. After days of profound exchange, the small expedition prepared to return, but they did not leave alone. A delegation of Dreamweaver emissaries, their forms subtly more defined for the journey, chose to accompany them. They were not immigrants, but diplomats of the dream, living bridges to their valley. The voyage back across the known world felt different. The sky seemed wider, the forests deeper, the light richer. The coalition, once a trio of reconciled rivals, now felt complete, a quartet of complementary perspectives. They were returning not merely with a new ally, but with a new definition of what it meant to build together. The work ahead was no longer just about constructing towers and spires. It was about building a lasting, resilient understanding, one resonance gate at a time, threading the dream of Evendel into the waking reality of their shared world. The air within the Concord Spire's new council chamber hummed with a quiet, unprecedented gravity. For the first time in recorded memory, a governing body met with 4 equal voices. Captain Valeria, her Luminaran armor polished to a muted gleam, sat beside Elder Phalon, whose robes still carried the scent of damp earth. Archmage Silos seemed woven from the chamber's own light, while the Dreamweaver emissary, introduced as Kaelin of the Silver Reverie, had a presence that softened the edges of the room, making the very stone feel slightly more receptive. Their first act was not a debate, but a ratification. Before them lay the Charter of Resonant Coexistence, a document whose words were less important than the intent woven into its creation by Elion and Lyra. It did not demand uniformity. Instead, it framed their alliance as a kind of ecological pact, where each city's unique architectural species was vital to the health of the whole biome. The Charter's core principle was elegant in its simplicity: to maintain the world's song, not through control, but through attentive, shared listening. This act of signing made the Harmonious architects the official stewards of that principle, transforming Ilion's fledgling order into a recognized inter-city institution. Their mandate was clear: to facilitate annual convocations at the Spire and to maintain its peak as a continuous monitoring station, a stethoscope on the heart of the world. Yet the moment the ceremonial quills were set down, the true difficulty began. The Charter's beautiful language about shared stewardship and mutual enrichment immediately ran into the hard, unyielding wall of practical reality. To truly understand and support the world's song, the cities would have to share what they had guarded most jealously for millennia, their foundational secrets. In Luminara, a master light weaver might be asked to reveal the precise harmonic sequence for growing a solar crystal, a formula passed from master to apprentice for generations. In Sylvan Weave, an elder singer might hesitate to teach the deep-root melodies that encourage stone to shift, fearing the loss of a sacred tradition. Even in Etheris, the complex algorithms for navigating celestial currents were considered a state secret. Bureaucratic resistance sprang up instantly, a labyrinth of permits, oversight committees, and cultural heritage review boards that moved with glacial slowness. More poignant was the personal, cultural hesitation, the deep-seated feeling that sharing these arts would dilute a city's very identity, making it less special in a world now striving to be whole. Seeing the Grand Alliance threaten to stall in a mire of procedure and pride, Elion and Lyra made a decisive move. They proposed the first major project under the new charter, one that would turn the abstract idea of sharing into a concrete, collaborative act. They would build a living archive within the Concord Spire itself. This would not be a vault of locked scrolls, but a dynamic, growing repository where the core principles of all 4 architectures could be recorded, not as static formulas, but as living teachings. A Luminaran crystal would be sung into existence by a Sylvan weave singer, while a Dreamweaver would help encode the emotional intent behind an Etherian star map into a resonant pattern of light. The archive itself would be the lesson, its very construction requiring the synthesis it was meant to preserve. The stakes of this project escalated the moment the first foundation stone was laid. This archive would become the ultimate safeguard, a bulwark against the kind of forgetting that had nearly shattered the world. If future generations ever lost sight of the importance of balance, the proof would be here, woven into the walls. Yet, by concentrating the most profound knowledge of 4 civilizations into one place, they also created the most tempting target imaginable. Whispers began to circulate, not of open rebellion, but of quiet concern. What if a faction sought to claim this knowledge not for unity, but for dominance? What if an individual, driven by strong feeling or ambition, sought to use these combined principles to craft something unforeseen? The archive's greatest strength, its completeness, was also its most profound point of attention. As the project commenced, Elion oversaw the inscription of the first master crystal, a flawless prism that would hold the foundational axioms of harmonic geometry. Watching the light settle permanently into its facets, he felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. The structure was beginning, the systems were in place, and in that moment of culmination, he felt not a pull to lead the next charge, but a subtle, persistent urge to step away from the very center he had worked so hard to build. The architect in him knew that a well-designed system should not rely forever on its original designer. The ceremony in the spire's chamber was quiet, a passing of a chisel, not a crown. Elion stood before the full assembly of the Harmonious architects, his form still bearing that faint, integrated light, but his movements now carrying the careful grace of one who has carried a great weight for a very long time. With deliberate hands, he placed the master architect's crystal prism into Lyra's waiting palms, her fingers, still stained faintly with the earth of 100 building sites, closed around it. There were no grand speeches, only a simple declaration of trust. The order needed a leader who understood foundations, not just spires. In that moment, the future of their work shifted from theoretical unity to grounded practice. Lyra's vision was immediately clear. She would steer the architects away from being purely advisors to the great cities and turn their eyes toward the countless smaller villages and frontier settlements that lay between them. These communities, she argued, were the true testing ground for balanced living, where the principles of light, root, sky, and dream had to be woven into the practical needs of daily life. Her leadership promised wells that sang to keep water pure, communal halls that gathered sunlight and starlight equally, and bridges built with stone that remembered its connection to the mountain. Elion retreated to a small, sun-washed studio nestled in the spire's shadow. It was a space of quiet purpose, filled with the blended light of the 4 cities, a constant, gentle reminder of the harmony he had helped forge. Here, he intended to write his final and greatest work, the definitive treatise on the architecture of light and eternity. Yet the words did not come easily. The weight of his own history pressed upon the blank pages. How could he, the architect who had once reshaped his own masterpiece to preserve it, write a doctrine on creation without it becoming an unyielding law? He wondered if his name would be remembered only for that moment in Luminara, with his later contributions seen as a mere afterthought. He did not want future students to memorize his techniques. He wanted them to understand the spirit behind them, the essential truth that strength lies in adaptable balance, not in rigid perfection. This struggle shaped the work itself. He set aside complex diagrams and harmonic equations. Instead, he began to write in parables and imagine dialogues. He wrote of a master glassblower who learned resilience by studying the willow, and of a city of mirrors that forgot the warmth of the sun. He framed profound architectural principles as conversations between a stone and a raindrop, or between a beam of sunlight and a deep root. His treatise would be a book of wisdom, not a book of rules, accessible to the farmer tending a sung field as much as to the mage calibrating a crystal. This choice was his final, quiet rebellion against dogma, ensuring his legacy would be a conversation starter, not a conversation ender. Time, however, had become a precious and diminishing resource. The immense effort of channeling the second song's birth within the echoing vault had never fully left him. His vitality, once as enduring as the structures he designed, now followed a gentle but undeniable tide, moving with a soft and persistent rhythm. The act of writing, of focusing his mind to shape these essential stories, became a daily practice of profound will. Each completed parable was a small victory in a quiet journey, an effort to impart the core of his understanding while he could. He worked by the wide window, the ever-changing light from the Concord Spire, painting his desk in silver, gold, and soft blue, a living testament to the balance he described. One evening, as the light deepened into twilight's blend, a soft knock came at his studio door. He expected a messenger from Lyra, or perhaps a young architect with a carefully drafted question. But the figure who entered carried the quiet, shifting aura of Evendel. It was Kalen of the Silver Reverie, the Dreamweaver emissary. He did not bring a scroll or a formal greeting. In his hands, he held a simple, shallow basin filled with clear water, and his eyes held a look of gentle, knowing compassion. "I have been listening to the echoes of your thoughts, Master Architect," he said, his voice like a breeze through chimes. "They speak of a burden you no longer need to carry alone. We Dreamweavers have an art for such things. We call it the letting go of crystalline regret. It is not forgetting, it is understanding that a story, once lived, belongs to the world now, not only to the one who first lived it. May I show you?" The knock on his studio door was firm and familiar. Captain Valeria stood on the threshold, not in her full ceremonial armor, but in the simpler, polished greaves and tunic of her daily duties. In her hands, she held a small velvet case. The air between them held no trace of their first confrontation in the flickering halls of Luminara, only the quiet respect of those who have weathered the same storm from different decks. "I come without the council's seal," she said, her voice carrying its usual clarity, but softened at the edges. "This is from the Restored Architects Guild." She opened the case. Inside, on a bed of midnight silk, lay a medal. It was not the blazing sunburst of a military hero. It was a subtle, elegant thing, a circle of white gold engraved with the interlocking symbols of the four cities: crystal, root, cloud, and wave, surrounding a single, perfect keystone. The inscription read, "For integrity and first principles," the highest honor the guild could bestow, and the very one he had been stripped of a lifetime ago. Her presentation was a formal, public act of reconciliation, but her presence here, in his quiet studio, made it something more personal. Luminara does not forget, Valeria said, meeting his gaze. But it can learn to remember differently. She did not leave immediately. Sitting in the chair by his window, the steadfast soldier allowed a crack in her own composure. Keeping the peace between diplomats and Dreamweavers is infinitely more complex than securing a perimeter, she admitted, a faint note of frustration in her voice. My training was in threat assessment and neutralization. How does one neutralize a misunderstanding? How does one secure a cultural border that is meant to be open? Her hands, usually resting with ready calm, flexed slightly. I feel like an architect trying to build with only a sword. Elion listened, recognizing the struggle not of strategy, but of identity. He offered water, not advice. When I stood before the flawed Keystone, he said gently, I had to unlearn my first principle. I believed a flaw was a thing to be removed. I learned it was a thing to be integrated. Your purpose was to protect Luminara. That has not changed, but the definition of what threatens it has expanded. You are not a warden of a single city anymore. You are a guardian of the space between them. He saw the solution, not in a lecture, but in an exchange. What if your guardians did not just protect our envoys, but became them? He suggested. Establish a program. Send a squad to walk the living paths of Sylvan Weave for a season, to learn how that city feels its security. Welcome a contingent of Evendel's dream wardens to observe your light weavers. You are not building a wall. You are weaving a net, and every strand of mutual understanding makes it stronger. Valeria was silent for a long moment, looking out at the Concord Spire, its light a constant, gentle pulse against the darkening sky. A slow nod. A net, she repeated, the word unfamiliar but fitting on her tongue. We could start with joint patrols of the new resonance gate sites. A practical beginning. She stood, the metals case left respectfully on his desk. The formal honor was for the record. This conversation was for the future. After she left, the studio was quiet again, but the silence felt different. Elion looked at the metal, its cool metal warming in his hand. It was not a reward for the past. It was a key for the future, a symbol that the most rigid institutions could bend toward grace. He looked out the window, beyond the spire. The landscape was no longer a collection of separate, brilliant points of light. It was a single, interconnected constellation. Each city, a star, held in the delicate, resilient balance of the whole. A profound sense of peace settled over him, not as an end, but as a deep and quiet completion. The foundation was sound. The builders were at work. His part in the great structure was nearing its natural, graceful end. The final words of the treatise of balanced light were not etched in crystal, but in the quiet space after the stylus was set down. Elion had completed his life's work. The book's closing chapter framed the great cities not as frozen monuments to a perfect past, but as living voices in an eternal, evolving conversation. Luminara spoke in the language of light, Sylvan weave in the patient dialect of root and leaf, Etheris in the boundless grammar of the sky, and Evendel in the subtle poetry of shared dream. True architecture, he wrote, was the space where these four dialogues met, listened, and wove something new. The first copies were inscribed on durable crystal leaf, a medium that would hold the words for millennia. They were delivered by solemn courier to the central archives of all 4 capitals, and, of course, to the great library within the Concord Spire itself. These were not placed under lock and key as secret lore. They were set on open lecterns, becoming foundational texts for the new academy, required reading for any student who wished to understand not just how to build, but why. With the last copy delivered, a profound and unexpected emptiness settled over Elion. The great task that had given shape to his days, the urgent purpose that had carried him from fugitive to founder, was simply done. The quiet of his studio, once a sanctuary for thought, now felt vast and echoing. What does a builder do when the final blueprint has been drawn, and the work of construction belongs entirely to others? His answer was a decision of beautiful simplicity. He laid aside his title of master and took up the humble role of tutor at the Spire's fledgling academy. He did not lecture from his own treatise. Instead, he sat in sunlit courtyards and under starlit canopies with small groups of wide-eyed apprentices. These students came from all races drawn to the Spire's promise, not just elves. To them, he told stories. He spoke of the necessary departure from Luminara, not as a tale of heroism, but of a difficult, pivotal choice. He described the Shade Stalker as a lesson in what fear can build when left unchecked. He recounted the awe of first seeing the Dreamweavers' valley and the frustration of learning to speak without words. His personal history, with all its doubt and discovery, became his most powerful curriculum. He was teaching that true architecture is not about beauty and power alone, but about the profound responsibility of shaping a world, the courage to adapt when you are wrong, and the humility to listen to voices unlike your own. One tranquil evening, he stood on the Spire's highest public balcony, not as an architect surveying his work, but as an old man appreciating the view. In the distance, the 4 distinct city lights, the gold of Luminara, the green silver of Sylvan weave, the cool blue of Etheris, and the shimmering silver of Evendel, blended on the horizon into a single, harmonious glow. As he watched this silent symphony of illumination, he felt it, not with his ears, but in the quiet center of his being. The world song resonated within him, no longer strained or pleading, but strong and steady, a deep, peaceful hum that was the heartbeat of a world finally learning to sing in balance. The gentle symphony in his mind became as constant as his own breath. In his final years, Elion no longer needed complex instruments to gauge the health of the world. He heard it directly, a quiet, beautiful background music woven from the 4 great melodies. His daily walks through the gardens surrounding the Concord Spire were not for exercise, but for attentive listening. He could distinguish the robust chorus of Luminara's light from the deep, patient hum of Sylvan weave's roots, the soaring aria of Etheris from the shimmering, emotive resonance of Evendel. Most precious to his ears were the new, small harmonies, the duets and trios born from cross-cultural projects. A bridge in a frontier village, built with sung wood and calibrated crystals, would chime a unique, joyful note. A communal hall designed by a team from all 4 cities created a complex, layered chord that made him smile. He was not just hearing the world's song, he was hearing its future being composed in real time, one collaborative act at a time. This made him a living barometer for the entire alliance. His simple, periodic reports to the council, often just a few lines noting a slight strain in a particular harmonic thread or a new resonance, flourishing in another region, became invaluable. He could sense a minor bureaucratic delay in Etheris as a faint, grinding dissonance, long before it caused a project to stall. He could hear the successful integration of a Dreamweaver artisan in a Luminaran studio as a sudden, brilliant sparkle in the melody. The council learned to trust these subtle audits, using them to preempt small misunderstandings before they could grow into the kind of fractures that once threatened everything. His quiet listening did more to maintain peace than a legion of diplomats, yet this profound spiritual attunement existed in stark contrast to his physical state. The frailty that had followed him from the echoing vault deepened. His steps became slower, his hands less steady, but his mind, his perception, remained as sharp and clear as a master-cut gem. This difficult divergence was hardest on Lyra, who visited him often. She would watch him struggle to rise from his chair, his body weary, and then listen as he described with crystalline clarity the exact emotional tone of a new mural being woven in Evendel, or pinpoint a site where the earth song felt particularly content. The architect who had reshaped continents now relied on a cane, yet his inner vision saw further than ever. It was a quiet heartache, witnessing the vessel weaken while the light within burned so brightly. When friends, their voices thick with concern, suggested magical treatments to slow his decline, Elion refused with gentle firmness. To extend his life through artificial means would contradict the very cycle he had written about, he explained. All architecture, from a single sung brick to a floating city, has a season. It is built, it endures in its purpose and spirit, and then, when its time is complete, it makes way for new foundations. My transition is not a flaw in the design, he would say, his voice soft but certain. It is part of the design, a final lesson in graceful change, in trusting that the song is strong enough to continue beautifully without its first conductor. His acceptance was a profound teaching in itself, a quiet demonstration that eternity is found in legacy, not in endless duration. This approaching moment became a quiet, reflective time for the entire alliance. The systems were in place, the resonance gates hummed, the harmonious architects flourished under Lyra's leadership, but Elion's presence had been a symbolic keystone, a living reminder of why it all began. His absence would be the ultimate test of the structure's integrity. Could the symphony sustain its harmony without the one who first learned to listen to all its parts at once? The question hung not in fear, but in solemn anticipation, a collective deep breath held by 4 civilizations. Then came a morning when the symphony in his mind was not just clear, but overwhelmingly vivid and joyful. It swelled with the sounds of children, learning a blended song in the academy courtyard, of a new hybrid orchard bearing its first fruit in a borderland, of a star chart being completed by mages who once would never have shared a room. The music was so full, so complete, it felt ready to overflow. That was when he turned to Lyra, his eyes alight with that familiar, integrated glow, and made a simple request. He asked to be taken to the Concord Spire's highest observation platform one last time, to see the tapestry of lights his listening had so long described. The ascent to the highest platform was a slow, silent procession. Lyra supported his arm, her touch as steady as bedrock. Valyria walked ahead, clearing a path with a quiet authority that now commanded respect, not fear. Elder Phelan, and Archmage Celos followed, their presences a grounding root and a guiding wind. When they emerged into the open air, the world was bathed in the molten gold of a setting sun. The light struck the Concord Spire's central crystal array at a perfect, fleeting angle. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, as if answering a call only it could hear, the spire's peak began to glow with an internal, gathering luminescence. In the distance, the great cities responded in a sequence of breathtaking beauty. First, Luminara's softened dawn light intensified, not to a glare, but to a warm, brilliant gold that painted the western clouds. Then, from the depths of the Everwood, Sylvan Weave's heart tree released a pulse of verdant silver, a wave of vitality that made the distant leaves shimmer. High above, Etheris floating spires ignited with a cool, serene azure, like captured pieces of the evening sky. Finally, from the hidden valley, a column of shimmering, opalescent light rose from Evendell, a visible song of dream and memory. 4 distinct beams, 4 unique harmonies, arced across the darkening continent. They converged upon the Concord Spire. The energies did not collide, they wove. Threads of gold, silver, azure, and pearl intertwined around the central crystal, spinning faster and tighter until they fused into a single, towering column of pure, harmonious radiance. It ascended into the twilight, a silent, brilliant testament to the unity they had forged. The light did not roar, it hummed, a profound, physical vibration that was felt in the chest more than heard by the ear. In that radiant embrace, Elion stood transfixed. The symphony in his mind was no longer an internal melody. It was the very air around him, the light itself. He had spent a lifetime learning to listen, to build, to mend. Now, there was nothing left to do but be. He did not raise a hand. He did not chant a final spell. He simply let go. A look of profound peace settled upon his features, and with a quiet, willing sigh, he released his tenuous hold. His consciousness, the essence of his understanding, and his love for the song, did not vanish. It flowed outward, merging seamlessly with the column of woven light. His form grew still, a vessel now at rest, but the light around him did not dim. It brightened, the hum deepened, gaining a richer, more vibrant clarity, as if a missing layer of the harmony had just clicked perfectly into place. This transition was not a silence, but a resolution, a final, perfect note that completed the chord and allowed it to ring true forever. Lyra felt it first, not as an absence, but as a shift in the ground beneath her feet, a new, gentle firmness in the spire's song. Valyria saw the light intensify and understood, with a soldier's recognition of a purpose fulfilled. Phelan felt the roots of the world sigh in contentment, and Celos saw the harmonic equations of the cosmos briefly, beautifully simplify. Elion was gone. And yet, he was everywhere, his wisdom now a permanent strand in the living lattice of the world's song. The great architecture was not a monument he had left behind. It was the continuum he had joined. The light slowly faded from its blinding peak, settling back into the spire's crystals, which now pulsed with a softer, steadier, and unmistakably richer glow. The first stars appeared in the violet sky, not as distant points, but as gentle echoes of the harmony now held safely within the world, a legacy of light that had learned its true strength, not from standing alone, but from becoming part of an eternal, resilient whole. The feeling across the 4 cities was a quiet, resonant sound, Like the deep, full note that follows a beautiful chord, Elion was remembered not with somber silence, but with a shared, reflective music. In Luminara, choirs sang the hymn of the first dawn, a melody he had helped compose. In Sylvan weave, singers wove his name into the roots of a young, strong oak planted beside the heart tree. The elves did not speak of an ending, but of a homecoming to the song, a completion as natural and necessary as a river returning to the sea. His presence had not vanished. It had simply changed its form, becoming a permanent, harmonizing part of the very fabric of their world. This understanding transformed reflection from a closing door into an open window, a way to feel his guidance in every balanced beam of light and every gracefully sung stone. The alliance he helped build did not falter. It had been tempered in the fires of crisis and cooled in the waters of shared purpose, emerging stronger and more flexible. The Council of Four Voices continued its work, its debates now less about survival and more about stewardship, about nurturing the delicate, vibrant network they had created. Captain Valeria's guardians became the wardens of the weave, their patrols a visible, reassuring thread connecting the resonance gates, ensuring the free flow of people and ideas remained safe and open. The political unity was no longer a temporary measure, but the bedrock of a new civilization. At the helm of the Harmonious architects, Lyra brought a leader's touch that was both compassionate and unflinchingly practical. She understood that grand philosophies meant nothing if they could not build a better well or a warmer home. Under her guidance, the order became less a college of theorists and more a guild of problem solvers. They traveled to settlements where a Sylvan weave singer and a Luminaran light weaver might be struggling to integrate their techniques, and instead of delivering a lecture, they would simply build alongside them, demonstrating synthesis through shared labor. The exchange of knowledge became a living, breathing process, as constant and essential as the flow of the ley lines themselves. This constant cross-pollination of ideas began to blossom in the most visible way possible, through the cities themselves. The architecture of the realms started to evolve, giving birth to breathtaking hybrid forms. In the high glades of Sylvan weave, one could now find sky woods, groves of trees whose leaves were delicate, photosensitive crystals that changed color with the passing hours, drinking in both sunlight and starlight. In Luminara, among the majestic spires, new dreaming towers rose, their surfaces subtly responsive to the emotions of those within, glowing with a calming blue for contemplation or a soft gold for celebration, a gentle infusion of Evendel's fluid artistry. These were not acts of cultural dilution, but of joyful creation. Each new style was a conversation made solid, a testament to a legacy that valued balance over purity. The great cities were no longer isolated wonders, proud and distant stars. They had become interconnected hubs in a vibrant, resonant network, each one unique but fundamentally linked, drawing strength from their differences and giving strength in return. A student from Etheris could walk a path of floating stones in Sylvan weave, and a Dreamweaver artisan could find a studio in Luminara where the light itself helped shape her visions. And in every academy, for every new apprentice who picked up a tuning crystal or learned a root song, the journey began with the same text. The treatise of balanced light was not kept on a pedestal. Its crystal leaves were worn smooth by countless hands. Young minds learned of the silent cracks and the echoing vault, of a choice made not for glory, but for preservation. The story of the architect who changed a spire to save their future was told not as a tale of rebellion, but as it truly was, the first necessary note in a newer, wiser song. It was a lesson in responsibility, a warning against the arrogance of unchanging light, and a promise that from acknowledged fragility could come unshakable strength. So the architecture of light and eternity endures, but it does not endure by remaining perfectly, statically itself. It endures because it learned to bend in the wind, to listen to the earth, to dream with the stars, and to grow with every new voice that joins the chorus. It is a living architecture, and its foundation is not stone, but understanding. Its spire is not a single point of light, but the space where all lights meet. And its eternity is measured not in millennia, but in the continuous, beautiful act of becoming. Decades after the great harmonizing, the halls of the Concord Spire held a different kind of music. It was the sound of children's laughter, echoing off the hybrid crystals, the murmur of students from 4 cities debating designs, and the steady rhythm of tools shaping a future built on shared memory. Among them was a girl named Lyra. She had no memory of a city of origin. Her earliest recollections were the blended light of the spire's atrium and the scent of parchment and living wood from the archives. The spire was her only home, its diverse community, her only family. While other apprentices mastered geometric axioms or root melodies, Lyra possessed a quieter, more intuitive gift. She would sit for hours in a sunlit courtyard or a quiet meditation alcove, a simple charcoal stick in her hand, but she did not draw the physical arches or crystal lattices before her. Her sketches captured something else entirely. On one page, the Luminaran envoy's chamber appeared not as a room, but as a pattern of sharp, golden angles softened at the edges by a faint, hesitant silver mist, capturing the lingering formality of its diplomats, slowly warming to collaboration. A sketch of the spire's great library showed the bookshelves as deep, strong roots, but from them grew branches of light that held not leaves, but floating, serene faces, capturing the profound peace seekers found there. One afternoon, Lyra found her. The master architect's hair was the color of moonlit snow, and her hands, though marked by a lifetime of stone and song, were still steady. She watched in silence as Lyra, perched on the edge of the central fountain, sketched the water's flow. On the paper, the water was not just liquid. It was a ribbon of interconnected memories, each droplet holding a tiny, blurred scene, a laughing child, a focused artisan, a couple sharing a quiet moment. The sketch felt like listening to the fountain's history. Lyra did not exclaim or startle the girl. She simply sat beside her, the weight of her presence as grounding as the mountain beneath them. After a long, comfortable silence, she spoke, her voice a low, warm rumble. You do not see the world as it is built. You feel the world as it is lived. This is not merely observation. It is a form of listening deeper than any ear. She saw in Lyra's gift a potential new thread for the great tapestry. For generations, their architecture had balanced the physical notes of light, root, and sky, then later integrated the conscious dream. But what of the unconscious emotional residue of a place? The accumulated joy, hope, and peace that became part of the very stones and lingered in the air. This was a resonance that had been felt, but never formally acknowledged, never intentionally woven into the design. Lyra's empathy was a lens for a spectrum of energy they had only sensed in passing. Lyra took the girl to a simple, unused storeroom near the spire's foundations. Inside, on a workbench, lay a rough, uncut block of resonant stone, a material that could absorb and gently echo harmonic frequencies. She placed a well-worn chisel into Lyra's hand, then closed the girl's fingers around its cool metal shaft. "This is not for carving shape," Lyra explained. "It is for inviting memory. Show this stone what this place feels like to you. Do not think of a wall or a plinth. Think of the feeling of safety you had when you first slept here as a child. Think of the excitement of a new idea being born in the council chamber above. Let your hands translate that feeling into the stone's song." The task was bewildering. How does one chisel a feeling? Lyra closed her eyes, her free hand resting on the rough stone surface. She let the ambient sounds of the spire fade, listening instead for the emotional undertone of the little room. She felt its quiet patience, its readiness to become something useful, its hopeful emptiness. Without a conscious plan, her hand moved. The chisel did not cut deep grooves. It feathered the surface, creating a texture that was soft to the touch, but caught the light in a way that made the stone seem to breathe. She carved no symbols, only a gentle, spiraling indentation in the center, a shape that somehow felt like a held breath finally released. When she was done, exhausted, she stepped back. Lyra approached and hummed a single clear note. The resonant stone answered. The sound it emitted was not a pure tone, but a complex, warm chord that seemed to hold within it a sense of calm anticipation and gentle welcome. The stone itself seemed softer in the light, no longer a blank block, but a vessel holding a specific, positive emotional frequency. It was a foundational act of empathic architecture. Under the eternal, balanced light filtering down from the spire's peak, Lyra looked from the transformed stone to the young artist. "The great work is never finished," she whispered, a statement of fact, not of weariness. "It is only ever evolving. We built a chorus from separate songs. Your generation's task may be to hear the silence between the notes and to give that silence a voice of its own." The tools were being passed again, not to replicate the past, but to listen for the future's new and necessary harmonies. A new chapter, written not in grand proclamations, but in the quiet language of felt stone and understood heart, had quietly begun.